Dr. Jane Morgan, a cardiologist and the former executive director of Piedmont Healthcare's COVID task force. Good to have you back. I remember we talked about this when California and Oregon did it first.
That's right.
And now the federal guidelines have changed. Has the science changed? Have we learned more about COVID, herd immunity? What explains the change?
So the science has not changed, but what has changed is the evolution of this virus. These last few variants have been relatively mild, have caused mild disease, and we see the number of deaths and number of hospitalizations has greatly decreased from 2020 and 2021 to 2024. And so we're starting to look at these more as our respiratory viruses that we will have seasonally, and how is it that we're going to manage those?
Okay, so some of the guidance here, as we said, that people who test positive do not need to stay home if they're fever-free for 24 hours without medication. That's self-explanatory.
Correct.
The other element here is that if symptoms are mild and improving, I am a baby when I get a cold or the flu. So what defines mild? Is there a clinical definition or is it subjective?
So this is subjective. How are you feeling? And really the key is if your symptoms are improving. And so that's the caveat. That's the key to that. If your symptoms are improving, then you can go out. The recommendations are for you to mask, limit your contact with others, try to be in a ventilated space. But if you're fever-free and your symptoms are improving, then you can now go back out into society.
There are still the seniors and the vulnerable among us. How do we take this guidance? Do we treat them differently? Do we stay away from them for those 5 days? Should anything change there?
And so there's not guidance on staying away from them, but there's guidance in making certain that you are aware of who's in your environment, and make certain if you are COVID positive and are around grandma, granddad, or someone in a hospital, or someone with cancer, or taking any type of cancer therapies, that you make certain that you mask, you make certain that you're in a ventilated area, and you try to maintain distance with that person in as much as you possibly can.
In the early years, during the emergency era of the pandemic, there were politicians who were saying it's the flu, treat it like the flu. The medical experts said, no, it is not like the flu. Have we reached a point where we treat this like the flu?
And let's be clear, it's still not the flu.
Yeah.
So when we look at 2023, the number of deaths from COVID, 75,000. And while that's greatly reduced from 450,000 in 2021, when we look at the number of flu deaths are 21,000. So almost at about 25% of what COVID deaths are. So even though COVID has greatly improved, flu still causes fewer deaths. So I want to be clear, this is not the flu. And certainly if variants were to change, we may have to go back and rethink some of that. But where we are currently with the landscape, we can certainly begin to enjoy a modicum of freedom with the herd immunity that we have won, a hard won, shall we say, herd immunity by hook or crook. So we've gotten there by sort of vaccination, sort of infection, sort of some combination of things.
Yeah.
But here we are. And society now has been exposed to this, and we are not as vulnerable as we were when this virus first came out.
Well, that certainly is good news. Dr. Jane Morgan, thanks so much.
Yeah, other good news to think about is that dating apps have decreased and marriage proposals have increased. So there are the two things that we see from COVID disappearing.
All right. I think there are a lot of benefits from fewer dating apps and marriage proposals. Dr. Morgan, thanks so much.
Thanks.